second verse of Psalms 23. And I've entitled this message, Green Pastures. You know, I was thinking on the way over, of course it was a little too late, I think I would have changed that title to Green Acres. Do you remember that? And I'll be Oliver Wendell Douglas. And I know everybody under 50 has no idea what I'm talking about. And of course my precious, beautiful wife would be the New York socialite. And I even have Mr. Haney, my landlord, here today. So, yeah, nobody has any clue what I'm talking about. All right, so anyhow, and I was going to sing it, so but I won't. We looked at last week, the Lord is my shepherd. He is my security. He is my refuge. He is my fortress. He's my stronghold. The security we find is only in the Lord, who is our shepherd. I shall not want. Contentment in the Lord. He gives us perfect peace. He gives us that contentment. And so today we're going to look at the second verse, and we're going to look at, first of all, the predators that attack the sheep. And it says that He makes me lie down in green pastures. That's letter A. He makes me. Now, think about that. Isn't that an odd, strange verse when you kind of read it and look at it? He makes me lie down. Why does He need to make us lie down? That seems that it would be something very natural. Something that we would all want to do, you know, to be kind of fat and happy, you know, just to enjoy the green pastures, to be able to relax, to be at ease, to be at peace and lie down. Yet it is the Lord who makes us to lie down. God is creating a perfect picture, a perfect analogy to describe us. And I believe that's why He created sheep. Sheep are very unique in the sense that if God was going to put a mirror for us to be able to see what we are like and for us to know ourselves, to understand who God created us to be, it would be the sheep that He created. And all the aspects, all of its personality, all of its attributes, the temperament that the sheep has is found inside of us. We are easily frightened. We are easily fearful. There's a lot of things that are always coming against us, and God knows that, and He's put that in the sheep so that we can see ourselves. And the reason we parallel sheep more than any other creature is that we might be able to know ourselves, what we are like. And there's 4 things that Keller brought out as a shepherd, and they all parallel us in our experience that keeps us from experiencing that peace, that rest, that ability to lie down, because that's the place where we grow. That's the place where we become strong in the Lord, where that internal fiber comes from. And let me just mention the 4 that he brought up. First is the fear and the timidity. That comes from being attacked by the predators. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and a sound mind. Also, the second thing, the tension and the friction which comes within the sheep pen itself, with the sheep and other sheep. Talk about that in a few moments, but there is a whole thing going on inside with those internal conflicts, those relationships. The third is the aggravations that we all face, the pests that will attack us. And finally is the hunger. You know, the rumbly and my tumbly, as one of the great philosophers once said, Winnie the Pooh, there's a rumbly in my tumbly. When you're hungry, you can't sit and rest and enjoy. You're out there foraging for food. So He makes me lie down. Who is He? Who is making us lie down? God is. The Good Shepherd is. The one who cares for our soul. He is the one who is making us to lie down. Only the shepherd can calm our fears. It's not just anyone. Anyone can't just show up. You know, Jesus said a stranger, the sheep will not listen to a stranger's voice. They'll run away. They recognize the shepherd's voice, and they will follow him. Y'all have dogs or pets. Your dogs, they're out there wagging their tail. They come up. They recognize you. They want to jump all over you. And when a stranger comes, they bark. Well, not my dog. Mine runs for the tall grass if it's a real bad stranger. He's a little fraidy cat. But for most dogs, they come, they greet you because they know you, but if they don't know you, usually they are going to bark. Well, the same thing with sheep. If they don't recognize who you are, they are going to run away. A sheep is in a constant state of suspense, of fear, and they will become sick if any or all four of these things they are dealing with. They are unfruitful. They're unproductive. They lose weight. Their wool becomes very stringy. It's not usable because of the fear inside. And so a healthy, strong sheep is going to have a heavy coat, is going to have a good, strong coat of wool, and that never happens by accident. If you were to drive along someplace and there were some sheep out there and you saw this sheep and it was healthy, it was strong, it had a full coat, it doesn't matter what else you saw, you can know without knowing, whether the shepherd happens to be present or not, that behind that sheep there was a shepherd who was tending that lamb, tending that ewe. If there is a Christian who is strong, who's filled with the Spirit, who's anointed, who is fruitful in his walk, you can know without knowing that there is a shepherd behind him, because that will not happen naturally. It's not a freak of nature where this sheep is out there by himself and all of a sudden it becomes great and strong and powerful without the Lord or any other one else to watch over him. That does not happen. That will not happen. Now let's look at two reasons. First of all, why sheep become sickly, unfruitful, unproductive, unable to lie down. And one of them that I had mentioned earlier was the tension or the friction with other sheep. Have you ever had a fight with your spouse if you're married? Have you ever had conflict going on? I mean, you had this argument, and it's happened to me so many times. I'm sure it's probably happened to you. I'm not at peace. I'm not at rest. I can't just go and lay down and go to sleep. I'm going to be tossing and turning all night because of the tension, because of what is going on. Don't feel right. Just don't act right. The whole 9 yards. You see, when you are in friction, when you are in tension with either your spouse, friend, a neighbor, coworker, it doesn't matter who it is, you're not going to be happy. You're going to be in turmoil inside, and you begin to do what the sheep begin to do. We kind of ruminate, we kind of mull over in our minds, and we think about the incident that took place and all the things that she said and all the things that you said and all the things, usually it's about 4 or 5 minutes later that I wish I would have said, and I got replaying this over and over again in my mind, the whole incident. And sometimes we just can't get it out of our minds. Now, when you're in that state, are you enjoying peace? Are you enjoying the comfort? No, you are in that internal turmoil. That's what happens with the sheep. They fight with one another. And, they obsess over that. They replay it over and over in their mind. How many people have gotten offended and simply walked away from relationships. Happens in the church. They'll get offended with something that happens, and they simply walk away from those relationships, and they keep them in turmoil for years and years and years. That is, and this was an interesting thing too that I saw. There's a pecking order. I knew about the chicken pecking order, where there's the big rooster who's in charge of the whole hen house, and under him is another chicken, and the next one. I mean, there's a whole pecking order. If there's 100, there's a number 1 to 100, and everyone knows which number they are. Well, and in the animal kingdom, that is common. And with the sheep, that's also common. You know, you get this big, strong ewe, and they'll come and they'll just pick on one of the little lowly ones to put them in their place, to let them know, hey, I'm in charge here. And there is a pecking order all the way through the flock. That is something that we have to deal with, that we have to fight against. There was a story, if you want to turn into Mark chapter 9, with Jesus. And do you think now Jesus, he's Jesus, right? He's in charge of the first church here. And do you think there was problems going on with the first 12? I mean, there's only 12 of them. But it says in John 9, verse 32, then they came to Capernaum. When he was in the house, that's Jesus, he asked them, what were you arguing about on the road? They're walking along the road. You see that picture? And back there, they're just arguing one with another. Jesus isn't saying anything. And they're just fighting one with another. And so they get into the house, they get settled down. So he says, okay, what were you arguing about on the road? But they kept quiet. They weren't saying much now. You know, the chatter had completely stopped. The shepherd is here. The shepherd is looking at the sheep now and saying, okay, guys, what's the problem? And now all of a sudden, you know, they're tongue-tied. They don't want to say. And the reason was they had been arguing about which one was the greatest. There's 12 of them. And these are some of the top guns here that are arguing about which one's the greatest. And of course, there's another one in that group who's a bad dude. We're not going to talk about him. But this is not a great group of people. And they were arguing, and now they're ashamed and they're silent in front of the shepherd. And the point is that in any group, there's going to be this pecking order that wants to develop naturally. And Jesus is saying, it isn't going to work this way. We're not going to get you group of people to change the entire world, turn it upside down, if we're going to act the way the world acts. If we're going to live the way the world lives, it ain't going to happen. And so he goes on to tell them, sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, if any one of you wants to be first, he must be very last and servant of all. And Jesus would demonstrate that in word and deed throughout his entire ministry, and saying, if you want to grow in the kingdom of God, you can't be the top banana. You can't be asserting yourself to make this organization work. You have to be the very least. And he took a little child and had them stand among them, and taking him in his arms, he said, whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me. What a powerful picture lesson that he was trying to teach his 12. And in turn, the 12 would teach the rest of us from generation to generation to generation. The church that is going to be strong, that is going to be powerful, that's going to be fruitful, that's going to be anointed, a sheep pen that is going to be blessed, are those who are laying their lives down for one another. They're not trying to stand for their rights. They're not trying to take over, to take charge. That Jesus is in charge of all of that. And in that body, God's Spirit is free to move. It's free to have the liberty that we all want to have. And so those tensions are going to come within the group. And there's going to be a battle. Now, David, who wrote this, he was very familiar with those kind of tensions. He faced him his entire life. When he was a little boy, he was number 8 on the line, and all his other brothers used to pick on him. Matter of fact, have you ever felt left out as a child? You know, that mom and dad loved so-and-so more than me? Well, mom and dad, Jesse and his wife, I guess they did, because when it came time for Samuel to anoint the next king of Israel, it came to Jesse's house, 7 of the 8 children were invited. Guess who was left out in the shepherd field to tend the flocks? There ain't no way that they're going to pick this one, the little runt of the thing. But of course, they did. And so, and then David had to deal with Saul, King Saul, for all those years, trying to kill him. I mean, you talk about a guy who is dealing with an inferiority complex. I mean, that should have been David. And listen what he writes in Psalm 69. And I want to pick it up in verse 8. He says, "For I am a stranger to my brothers, an alien to my mother's sons. For zeal for your house consumes me, and the insults of those who insult you fall on me." See, David had this unique relationship with God, that he took on from God those insults that were coming on him, and he didn't take it personally. He says, "When I weep and fast, I must endure scorn. When I put on sackcloth, people make sport of me." Can you imagine? This guy's trying to humble himself, and people are making fun of David. "Those who sit at the gate mock me, and I am the song of drunkards." Now that's the lowest low you can get, when they're making songs up about you, and people are singing those songs, the drunkards making up those songs about who? King David. But look at verse 13, and this is what changes it all. He says, "But I pray to you, O Lord, in the time of your favor, in your great love, O God, answer me with your sure salvation." You see, David was looking to the shepherd. David was getting his comfort from the shepherd. He was not trying to please the people around him. He wasn't trying to get their favor first. He found it first in the Lord. And that's why God says, David is a man after my own heart. He stays close to the shepherd. And once the shepherd shows up, it seems like all the problems begin to dissipate. And so let's look at the second problem, pests and bugs. Pests and bugs, the irritants of life. And he mentioned a few of those bugs. The first one kind of really bothers me, nasal flies. I've never heard of that before. Nasal flies. Flies, I guess they get up in your nose. Isn't that disgusting? Imagine that? That you have these flies that get up there and crawl around. At the men's group yesterday, we got attacked by flies. We took our camp out and moved it inside because of the flies. But all of these nasal flies that get up there, and people very close to me have said that I have a big nose. And I can imagine, they get a whole colony up in my nose of these flies. I mean, that would be terrible. Now, the flies aren't going to kill you, but the flies will bother you. I mean, you can't get settled down. You can't enjoy the Lord when the irritants of life begin to bother you. It's the little things, that the little foxes that spoil the vine. And so when you're in traffic, when you're in a hurry, you got 100,000 people every morning, they're in a hurry to get to work, and nobody gets to work on time because they're all sitting there in bumper-to-bumper traffic. It's not going to kill you, but you got to go through that. And you go run into the store to pick up an item or two, and the line goes down the aisle, and you've got to wait. it bugs you, it's annoying, it's a nuisance, and all the little things that we have to deal with on a daily basis that just kind of come against us. And there was if any of you have read, this is back in the 80s, Larson's The Far Side. He was a cartoonist, and he had this picture of the world, and God was behind it, and he had a big chef's cap on, and he's got all these boxes behind him, and he's got, a box of reptiles that he pours in there. He's got a box of birds that he pours in, a box of amphibious fish and things like that. And so he's got all these boxes that he's pouring in, and he's got one box in his hand left. And he says, well, just to make it interesting, and it was a box of jerks. So he's going to fill the world with jerks, and just to make it interesting. Have any of you got those around you that just kind of annoy you, that just kind of make your life miserable? Okay, filling the life. I thought it was funny anyhow. But let me tell you this. If you let bugs in your life bother you, you will never generations. You know, can you imagine where God is trying to pull out those rocks in your life, those areas of stubbornness, those roots of bitterness? You know, we eat the fruit